Good morning, guys. I just wanted to post a few comments to get us going for the module this week, which starts Lady Audley's Secret, which is officially a sensation novel. We've been mostly doing realist novels, of course, with the exception of our apocalyptic novel that we began with by Mary Shelley. And so be sure you take a look at the information in the module about sensation fiction and how it's different from realism. Although in recent years, some scholars have been talking about how realism and sensation fiction have more in common than we may think. And one way that they talk about that is because so many realist novels include sensational elements, such as, lost letters or secrets, blackmail, adultery, any kind of what you might think of as sensational events or sort of stories or actions by the characters. But Lady Audley's Secret is through and through a sensation novel, and it was published in the 1860s, which was sort of the decade of the explosion of sensation novels. The other thing that I would sort of ask you to think about as you're reading through it is how power functions in the novel. Who has power and why, and the shifts of power that happen, and kind of what goes along with that, if you're thinking about especially knowledge as power, is what counts as knowledge. Do premonitions, a sense of fate, superstitious beliefs, hunches, intuition, does that count as knowledge? Or does it have to be tangible knowledge? Does it have to be something that I can quantify and prove and record? Repeatable science experiments, right? And so thinking about what counts as knowledge is one way of getting at this idea of power. And then who has knowledge and what kind of knowledge is it? As another thing to kind of keep track of. And then of course the gender dynamics will be really interesting to track in this novel. Thinking both about male and female roles throughout the novel. Alicia Audley will be an interesting female character, even though she could be qualified as a minor character. You'll meet her early on. And then, of course, Lady Audley of the title will be interesting to think about. But even some of the masculine roles will be interesting, right? What kind of qualities does George have? You'll meet him early on, too. What about Robert? And that also brings me to the question of who's the hero or heroine of our novel? Is it Lady Audley? Is she a villain? Is Robert our hero? What kind of hero is he? So these are just some questions that you can be thinking about as you're reading. I did want to take us back for just a second. I hope that you take a look at the synthesis notes for our discussion of the 10 of Wildfeld Hall. They were really interesting. Our two discussion leaders, Catherine and Katie, did a great job. One thing that I was thinking about, especially in terms of the question about sort of form and the narrator, some of your responses, which you can go see in the synthesis notes, it really struck me that Helen's diary sort of reveals complexities of her character to us. It shows, as some of you pointed out, just how much she suffered and just what passions she worked to quell. So I suppose my question is, does having Helen's diary allow us to see more of her feminist qualities? Or does it complicate them further? So on the one hand, her diary does give over most of the novel to her voice. But on the other hand, it's her voice in this sort of personal, private setting of the diary. Though it does sometimes awkwardly record the conversations that she's had in public with other people. So, it's framed by a man's voice, by Markham, and he gets the first word and the last word, and he frames the way that we come to Helen's diary. But most of the novel is from her diary, so is this a progressive way of showing the female voice and giving her voice the most room in the novel? Does the form of the diary complicate that? So just some things to think about that some of your responses made me ponder. And then you'll notice in the synthesis notes that I included an excerpt, just a very short excerpt, from an honors student who recently wrote an honors thesis on a chapter of it was on the 10 of Wildfeld Hall. And the question is about female voice and agency. And in particular, the student was interested in, what do we do with Helen's sort of religious convictions and her commitment to religion? Some of you took that up, and you'll see that in the synthesis notes. And so I thought it might be interesting just for you to read some of the students' comments who spent a long time thinking and arguing about that very issue. So how feminist do we cast Helen? It was a really interesting conversation that you guys had. So those notes will be posted in the Tenet module and handouts. You can take a look at those. Have fun with Lady Audley's Secret. It's a wild ride. If you like mysteries, it'll be a good one for you. And I look forward to touching base with our Wednesday Engage activity.